Well, I'm in my backyard and I'm going to cook you pizza in the camp oven tonight. And I dug in and found my old camp ovens. Now this camp oven here was put away in 2013 because I put it away properly. It's in pretty good condition. Now it's not perfect, but 2013 is a long time ago. The trick to looking after camp ovens is to keep them seasoned and to not wash them with soapy water. You can do that occasionally, but make sure you season them again. So this one's going to get a good clean out, but it's perfectly well looked after in a sense that there's no real rust in there at all. It's just a little bit dirty. So we've got our fire going, and unlike, I don't know, all the Brits and all the Americans you seem to see on YouTube doing survival type of videos, we don't cook over the flame. And particularly in the desert, where we've got really excellent hardwoods, they generate fabulous coals. And of course you'll know that the Aboriginal people cooked in the embers or in the ashes, not on the flame. They did do some work on the flame, usually the defurring of the animal. But generally you get a much better heat control if you don't use flame. Now under a barbecue plate we will use a little bit of flame, but under camp ovens and the like, no, we don't go to that trouble. It's a lot of trouble. You have to hang the camp oven on a tripod, all that kind of rigmarole. We'll show you how to do it with the coals. First though, means you've got to start your fire early and get the coals burned down from the really excellent hardwood. Most of the firewood we get around here is ironbark, narrowleaf ironbark. There are some other varieties, but it's all pretty good hardwood and makes excellent ashes. The kindling that I used today is Eucalyptus cameldulensis or river red gum. The wood that we would be using in the desert is predominantly acacia, Acacia cambudgi or Acacia georgiana, and occasional other forms of acacia for the kindling and things like that. All very good hard woods. Very hard on the axe though. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to make this pizza with the sort of ingredients that I would use on a trip in the desert or the Canning or Cape York or somewhere like that. So although I have a fridge, I'm going to try to give options that require, let's say, no refrigeration or less refrigeration. So in places like the Simpson Desert, you'll be able to get away with wrapping things up, for instance. So let's have a look at the ingredients here. We've got some pita breads or flatbreads. In this case, I'm not going with the mountain breads. The mountain breads are thinner, and I do use them for pizzas. I have used them extensively for pizzas. This is a kind of fatter bread. And if you go for the sourdough or the rye or something like that, more whole grains than white, it will last longer. It's in a bag which is resealable, so you can put it in your fridge if you have a fridge. If you don't have a fridge, then do what I recommend with other things, and that is try to layer it inside a cloth or something that just gives it a bit of extra insulation. Now let's move on to the main ingredient, pepperoni. Now pepperoni will keep without refrigeration quite nicely, and so will lots of other kinds of smoked meats. So look around for those. You could even make a pizza with jerky if you wanted to. So then let's go on to tomato paste. If you get the squeeze bottle, it's much easier to handle out in the desert. And again, although once it's opened it doesn't keep terribly long outside of refrigeration, you can also buy the little tiny pots, which might be a better idea for the desert. So you open one when you need it. These are the little foil type pots, so they're a good idea if you don't want to go for squeeze. I happen to have the squeeze one at home, so showing you that one. Now if you've got fresh capsicums and a way to keep them, great. If you don't, you can always go for dried. In this case this is actually tomatoes. Where am I? My capsicums are here. Okay, capsicums, tomatoes I've got mostly for my lunches. Might put some on this pizza though. And whether you choose to or not, I love my anchovies. They're in oil, they will keep pretty well. You can also get the little foil packets, so if you like your anchovies, you can use that. These keep really well with the oil anyway. Remember, all of these kinds of products and preservation techniques came from Mediterranean climates in peasant times when there was no refrigeration. A lot of the legislation and stuff we've got now means that manufacturers have to kind of bend over backwards, but most of this stuff will keep pretty well. I have got frozen mozzarella cheese. If you want to take this kind of cheese in a packet, best idea to keep it in the freezer, pull it out frozen. But just to show you, you don't have to do that. I've got a packet of these Baby Bells, and the dog next door is barking. So these Baby Bell cheeses, although again the label says to keep them refrigerated, I know from my experience hiking that we take these without refrigeration and they keep pretty well, and I'll show you why they do later on when I open one up, because I'm going to use this cheese rather than the mozzarella. So right now I'm going to go and put that mozzarella back in the freezer and grab myself a cold drink while I wait for the coals. And as I've said a few times now, the best way to keep a lot of things that are kind of, you know, prefer to be cool and out of the light is it wrapped up in newspaper, brown paper bag or alfoil. So you can pop your pepperoni in this brown paper bag, or your Baby Bell cheeses in a brown paper bag, and then store them somewhere in a cool dark spot in your car. I don't think next door's dog is going to stay quiet through this whole episode, but let me talk about what I'm going to do here. I've left it a little bit late to get my fire going, and couldn't get myself motivated to do this, so I'm going to prep the pizza before it gets too dark so that you can see what I'm doing. And I mentioned in a previous video that we once made a potato and onion pizza on the Hay River track, so I thought I might do half and half for this one just to show you what's possible. So whatever ingredients got out there, just think it up, make yourself a pizza. Slice the potato nice and thin so it will cook really well on the pizza, and I do the same thing with the onion. In this case I'm using a red or Spanish onion, but you could use a brown onion or a white onion if you wish. I tend to carry the red onions because I think they're more versatile. Have them in a salad, have them on a pizza. So I started off just doing half of the base in tomato paste, thinking that I wouldn't put tomato paste under the potato and onion, but then I thought actually that will make the one side of the pizza go crispy, so I ended up spreading it all over the whole pizza. Again, remember you can use the little tubs, they're resealable, or sorry, they're sealed, and you open them up, use just how much you want. So on one side I'm going to put the potato and the onion, just to show you that, you know, you can pretty much do anything you want. This was something that we did. We were in the end of the Hay River trip, or the end of the desert part anyway, at Batten Hill, where there was a nice big oven, and none of us had really thought of making pizza, so we kind of dug around to see what we had, and myself and my brother-in-law decided that we were going to make a bunch of pizzas of various kinds from the whatever we had left over, and we made a potato and onion pizza, and I really liked it. I think we used barbecue sauce on that one. So I'm cutting the pepperoni for the other side, and when I'm done with that pepperoni I can seal it up again in plastic, wrap it up again in foil or a bag or brown paper or whatever, and keep it in a cooler place inside the car. Remember that these things used to be hung from the rafters. So I'm just putting it for the moment into a brown paper bag, just to show you that that's the kind of thing that you could do. I've got my Baby Bell cheeses in the alfoil there, which I'm picking up just then. So this is the preserved capsicum. These are great on the premium biscuits for lunch as well, as is the tomato with a piece of cheese or anything else that you might want to put on there. A great thing to carry. You can dress up any meal with them. Then I pull out a piece of preserved tomato, semi-dried tomato, slice that up as well. Now I'm wishing I had brought out the paper towel, but I just keep going. In the interest of keeping the video going. So now I've got mushrooms, and I do mention at the end of the video some ideas about how you might carry mushrooms if you wanted to. I wouldn't typically put mushroom on my pizza out in the desert because I don't carry it, but I think you probably could. And I forget to put the anchovies on, so I put them on a little later. Now the Baby Bell cheeses, I said I was going to show you why these things keep fairly well. As long as you keep them wrapped up in paper, foil, something like that, and keep them in a cool spot in your car out of the sun. They're wrapped up in this plastic, and then the cheese itself is inside a little wax canister. And the wax canister has a kind of ziplock, kind of zip open kind of thing. So you open it up like that, pull the wax cylinders, the wax pieces off, and you're left with the cheese, which melts really quite well. And it, you know, if you could put it in a potato or something like that, it goes all nice and stringy, a little bit like mozzarella. You could put a lot more on than I'm putting on. I'm kind of sticking to the, I guess, the traditional kind of look of the marinara pizza. So just put the Baby Bells back in the foil, and that's how I would transport them in a cool spot in the car. Coals are a little slower than I'd hoped. So you can see I've got my head torch on. Head torch is really essential for this kind of bush camping, but there's a couple of rules to using one, and one is don't shine it in somebody's face when you're talking to them. Point it down at their chest. It's blinding, right? So, put it at the chest or point it above the head when you're talking to them around the fire. Anyway, speaking of the fire, mine is going, and I've got my camp oven in there preheating because I've been a little bit slow getting the fire ready. So, I'm kind of trying to preheat the camp oven. There's a few coals there now, so I think I'm going to give it a go and see how we end up. So out in the desert, obviously we don't cook in a drum or have a fire in a drum. But what I've done, I've done this in my backyard, so I have to do it this way. So what I've done is pulled some coals out, put them on a little piece of concrete. We would just put them on the ground normally. And that's for the underside of the camp oven. Alright, it's sitting nice and flat now. So let's put some on the top. And this is where our shovel comes in handy. Now pizza has to be pretty hot. They're getting up around 200 degrees. So we're going to make it pretty hot. We'll just spread a couple more around the base there. Alright, and then we'll regenerate our fire and allow that to preheat for a little while. So our pizza is here, ready to go into our camp oven. Camp oven is actually just a little bit hot at the moment, and when you're out on tour with me, I'll show you how you can judge that temperature. There are a couple of tricks that you can use. My favorite one I will show to you. It's a little hot, so I've just taken the lid off it and I'm going to let it cool down for a second. You would have noticed earlier that I put the pizza on baking paper. You don't have to do that, but I did it because it's easier to transport, and I should have done it before I made the pizza, but you probably saw I slid it under afterwards. You can put it directly into the camp oven, but we're going to try it with the baking paper. Now the baking paper will brown and kind of go a bit charred, but that's okay. So our pizza is in the camp oven, and now we're going to put the lid on. Make sure the lid's on properly, and we should be ready to go. And I'm just going to test the temperature. That's pretty close. Okay, let's have a look what we've got here. Better turn my light on. Yeah, looks like it might have a little way to go yet. It's cooking nicely. Temperature's obviously a little bit lower than I'd hoped. So we put a bit more heat underneath and a bit more heat on top, and you just got to play with it a little bit. Various kinds of wood are hotter than others, and I can show you how to make sure that the temperature is right. But it's coming along quite okay, and won't be too long and it'll be ready. Sounds like one of the neighbours is having a COVID lockdown kind of breakdown, yelling and screaming. But hopefully you can't hear that. That looks pretty good. I reckon we're going to call it and pull it out of there. Okay, there it is. There's our pizza. Let's cut it down here. Hard to do with one hand. So there's our potato and onion, and the other side is our pepperoni, etc. Pepperoni, anchovies. Now, pepperoni, anchovies, etc. And you can see our cheese. Not quite the mozzarella, but probably more in keeping with the look of the traditional marinara. Well, it's the next morning. I hope you enjoyed that video on how to make pizza using the kind of ingredients that would last for a while on tour. I added some mushrooms at the end. I've never tried this, but I suspect you'd be able to carry mushrooms for a period of time. They would probably wrinkle up and you'd need to rehydrate them. I wonder if you could slice them and dry them first at home and carry them that way. Be interesting to do that. I normally don't have mushrooms on my pizzas out on the trail in the desert regions, but anyway, hope that was enjoyable.